Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this presentation. I'm Associate Professor Petra Buergelt, and I'm co-leading the Indigenizing of the Psychology Curriculum at the University of Canberra. It's my honor and pleasure to share with you how we are decolonizing and indigenizing the psychology curriculum by co-creating and co-implementing a holistic long-term and iterative journey map. I'm presenting on behalf of the entire psychology team, and you see them all as co-authors because we're all indigenizing together as a team. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and the continuing connection to land and culture. And we pay our deepest respect to elders past, present, and future for keeping and passing on their worldviews, knowledges, and practices. Here we are at the University of Canberra, we are taking a team approach because that's a very big characteristic of Indigenous culture to be collectivistic. So we created strategically an indigenizing team which consists of the head of the discipline, the program director, and the course convener for each of our 3 courses. And the reason being is that they're really important because they are having decision-making power. So everything we're deciding is basically sanctioned by them. But also each of them have really important knowledges and up-to-date knowledges. So having them in the indigenizing team also means we are taking into account their different perspectives as well. And they are connecting us back to the whole psychology team, which is really important. We also have the UC Indigenous educational designers in our team, which is connecting us to the UC level so that they know what we are doing on the cold phase, but also we are getting their input. So we are always up to date with what's happening at the UC level and can respond to that. And then we are in a constant two-way communication with the psychology team. So to make sure that we are all together taking this journey. We are also linked in with the UC Indigenizing Task Force, with the faculty indigenizing team, and with the UC Indigenous Research Initiative as well. And we are also linked with the Australian Indigenous Psychology Education Project. So really important that we are getting the knowledges from each of those upper gremiums and can utilize them, but also that we can feed back and influence what's happening in those gremiums so that we create an environment in which we can thrive. Next, we selected a governance system which is very much akin to Indigenous governance because it's based on ecological principles, but also it enables groups to govern themselves collaboratively as partners for the mutual benefit of all. It distributes power. It gives each of the team members power to consent and object. And it's harnessing diversity, which enables us to make more accurate decisions and to be innovative in what we are doing. And it produces harmonious, respectful, self-organizing and self-correcting groups. And together we get more done and more harmoniously. Then next, we created guiding principles. We agreed that that we are committed to authentically indigenize, that we needed to engage in a long-term, gradual, circular, iterative, and emerging process. That is really important for us to co-design, co-implement, and co-evaluate with relevant partners within and outside the university, and to engage at all times in reciprocating and two-way communication across all levels, and especially with the whole psychology team. We are very much recognizing that we are on new territory, and so to set ourselves free, we created that it's okay to not know, which is very challenging, especially for academics, but a very powerful place. That there are no experts, but that we are all learners, and to support each other in two-way learning. to learn by doing and to figure it out on the way. That it is absolutely not only okay to make mistakes, but that actually mistakes are really useful learning opportunities. And the name of the game is to learn as fast as possible. That there's many ways of doing it, and just to try it out and try it on. And to value a diverse perspective. Again, there are great learning opportunities, and it's really important for us to have respectful harnessing, which we're doing with our governments. And to be at all times generous with each other as we are learning. The next step then we needed to do was to, or decided to do, is to create a big why. Why would we indigenize? And why would colleagues buy in to indigenizing? So we conducted yarning circles with the psychology team. We started with creating a safe space with all the different aspects which are important for creating a safe space. And then we created with them the wider context that we are all experiencing an existential crisis, and that the source of that crisis is Western cultures living disconnected from ancient knowledges and disconnected from and in disharmony with nature, as a growing body of literature indicates. And that to stem the tide, that we need to learn or remember living in connected and harmonious relationships with nature, self, and others. And that Indigenous peoples and societies are masters of living in harmony with nature and self and others. And hence, really, Indigenous worldviews, knowledges, and practices are the key to our survival and thriving. But then we really needed to bring each and every colleague on board. And so we asked them to, given that context, what is in it for you? We invited them to share in a yarning circle what they stand for, what the differences they want to make in the world, and what they want to accomplish with indigenizing for self and others. And that was really powerful, because as we were going around in the yarning circle, and everybody listened to each other's reasons, we discovered so many reasons why it is important to indigenize, which created a really big why within the psychology team. Next, then we had to work out how to indigenize. We knew that it requires a huge paradigm shift from a Western worldview to an Indigenous worldview, and that it requires a paradigm shift in our being, in our fundamental ways of being. And so we are clear that it needs to be a transformative journey which requires a lot of openness, a lot of unlearning, leaving our familiar waters, and that it will be a challenging journey. But if we take it as a team, which we are doing, that we can support each other and become a really high performance team in indigenizing. So the first step which we took was an initial audit, which the faculty asked us to do anyway. So we decided to take it very seriously, because we recognized that it would provide us with a really good baseline regarding the progress of indigenizing in psychology, and that we could use it as to plan forward. We added confidential feedback where we asked colleagues for their ideas, challenges, needs, and resources to also take a strength-based approach. And colleagues were amazing in the feedback they gave us. With the audit, we asked them to, or basically to set them free. We said, just do it intuitively. It's okay to have no entries. But the team asked us, can you give us an overview of Indigenous ways of being, knowing, and doing, so that we have a little bit more of an idea of what it actually is we are looking at. And so we did those overview sessions. And then after those overview sessions, each lecturer audited their own audit using the mapping document we created for them. And then the course conveners, the UC Indigenous educational designers, and I reviewed them and provided feedback to the conveners, what they could do, which gave them new ideas, but also was really useful for or is very useful for course conveners, so that they know what's going on in terms of indigenizing in their courses, and what also needs to be happening in terms of scaffolding. That's the overview, that's the mapping tool we created with Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing at the top. And the UC graduates and the APEC graduates, graduate attributes at the left. And that's the overview of the confidential feedback. We invited colleagues to complete. And based on all of this information, we created then a long-term journey map. And the essence of this long-term journey map is to build the capacity and confidence. So what came out is that there's a huge commitment to indigenize authentically, but what's required by staff is the knowledges and the confidence in doing so. So what needs to happen with our long-term journey is to create capacity and confidence by discovering Indigenous worldviews, knowledges, and pedagogies. To also decolonize, for staff to add content to their units that uncover historical and contemporary colonizing practices, which also might include actually taking content out of their units. And to also learn about, build relationships with, and learn from our local Ngunnawal people, but also from other Indigenous peoples around Australia, given the diversity of the Indigenous culture, and especially with very remote Indigenous communities, which we already have relationships with. Also then we created a very multi-pronged long-term approach, which includes also expanding our indigenizing team with other Indigenous peoples and communities, and to create an Indigenous steering group. This year, we started with the Indigenizing, with implementing this roadmap, and we just asked colleagues to dip in their toes, no matter how small, to just go for it, give it a try in terms of content or pedagogies, or both. We are supporting this process by providing indigenizing bodies who are a bit more, have more knowledge in this area. We also got faculty funding for two indigenizing initiatives. One is yarning circles on country with Indigenous academics, and the other one is creating an Indigenous student community of practice, which connects and links the Indigenous students within psychology. And then also to have our audit to constantly update so that it becomes a living document by colleagues sharing in their unit reports at the end of their units what they have done in terms of indigenizing. We're also creating lunchtime yarning circles and an Indigenous book club as well. Going forward, we are going to continuously refine the initiatives iteratively and to create new initiatives as they emerge, to continue with the audit, but also to co-create an indigenizing unit for staff, where staff can, in their own time, but also together, update their knowledge or get knowledge about Indigenous cultures, and also to co-create finances for exchanges with remote Indigenous communities. As I said, we already have those connections, but obviously that's very expensive, particularly for going a couple of days to really immerse ourselves in those remote Indigenous communities. That brings us to an end. I hope that has given you a really good overview of what we are doing in terms of indigenizing. And we are really looking forward now to your questions and your comments. Thank you so much.